Hi, this is Madi Diaz, and this is the LSQ podcast.
Hi, it's Jenny LSQ. Thanks for listening to the LSQ podcast. This is episode 112 with Madi Diaz. I kind of felt like I already knew Madi, even though we'd never met before, when we connected over Zoom this summer for the conversation ahead. And that's in part because we have many music friends in common, and so I'd heard a lot of great things about her over the years. But even more so because of her beautifully direct and intimate songs, which give a really vivid sense of her inner world with all of its relatable nuances. You can hear that gift on full display on albums like her 2021 LP History of a Feeling, and even more powerfully on her latest album Weird Faith, which came out earlier this year, and of which there's about to be a deluxe edition. That's out October 25th, and you can find out more at MadiDiaz.com.
Up.
Up. Yep.
I think I'm doing it.
You are doing it.
I'm doing it. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. You gotta love that. I was like, wait, who's Madeline? I'm like, that's Maddie. Maddie's name is Madeline. I'm like, is that Maddie's assistant? That's her.
All three syllables. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I like to have that formality at the start. How are you?
I'm good. I'm taking the entire day to do laundry, which I guess when you're gone for like 5 months, really just it takes a day, maybe two.
How many loads do you think it's gonna take?
Man, oh God. Honestly, I haven't even gotten to the laundry part. I've just been like sorting like hair ties and guitar picks and like tiny pieces of paper and like tiny rocks that I guess I've like collected along the way, etc. Yeah, stuff like that.
You're really procrastinating the laundry part. Because for me, when I get down to the tiny rocks, that's the last phase where there's just a bunch of stuff on your bed. That's just
Yep.
miscellaneous crap. And you're just like, all right, well, we're near the end now, but fuck.
No, I start there. I start at like the tiny packets of like lotion that you get for free in the various bathrooms or like, tiny hand sanitizers and tiny just I start with all of the crap to really just I love procrastination. It's like procrastination and nostalgia are like my two favorite drugs.
Procrastinalgia?
Procrastinalgia, nostalgia nation.
Nostalgia Nation. It is interesting. Both are temporal phenomena or something like that, though. So it kind of makes sense.
Temporal phenomena. Wow,
Like they're based in time. Like
that
procrastination is like very much in the space-time continuum, and so is nostalgia.
that's beautiful. Like, and you can kind of like loop in both of them.
Yeah,
Just like hit repeat and just like let it ride for as long as you can stand it.
exactly. I mean, I can't help but already wonder if there are analogies here to the larger topic of this conversation. By the way, Maddie Diaz is on the LSQ podcast. It's happening. Welcome, Maddie.
Hi, we just jumped right in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued, and I was going to take us on a slower dance to get to questions like this, but I'm so intrigued if I noticed that one of the things about your songs that is one of the great things about them is an attention to detail. And so I'm intrigued that you start your unpacking process with the tiny things first. And I wonder if your creative process is works in a similar fashion at all.
I think because isn't that sort of the thing? It's like I get really stuck on like three words that somebody said to me like last week. You know what I mean? Like these three words that felt really maybe they weren't even like that profound or important, but for some reason like the stickiness of them draws me into it and just like grabs my attention and holds my attention in like that sort of obsessive way. So yeah, that's kind of I will usually start with like I was wearing my right sock inside out, for like an entire walk. And I chose not to fix it. And like, what was it about like that day and that walk with that person that made me feel like I should get to that walk and to that person and to that conversation. And I had to like ignore this thing that was like going on in my right foot the entire time. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, deeply relatable content. The sock. Inside Out, because you're like, once you know it's the deal, you're like, I can tell. And maybe you can't really tell, but once I put my pants on inside out a shocking amount of time, because, like if we're talking about like just like stretchy pants, yoga pants, whatever, I'm like going to get my coffee, I'm going up for a walk. And then I go to put my hands in the pockets and I realize that I can't because the pockets are on the other side of them. And then
Yep.
suddenly pants that felt fine feel so wrong.
Yep. Well, that's like I feel like it always starts there and then I start to go like, what is it about me that like isn't paying attention enough to detail when I like first wake up in the morning? And how did I play that entire show with my underwear on inside out? How did I do that? How did I do that? How did I let that happen?
Do you remember when you first started having that kind of thing happen, where a turn of phrase or something like that, an apt thing like that, started to become interesting to you?
I think really paying attention to detail started actually for me like way later in the scheme of things. I think like initially when I started writing songs, it was just kind of like it feels good to sing. It feels good to play. I want to be a part of the thing. I want to express something and I'm not really sure what it is yet. And I think kind of like slowing myself down like in my later 20s, early 30s was kind of when, or really even just like having like a certain level of self-awareness, which maybe I wasn't really allowing myself the better part of my early to mid 20s that started to come to be, yeah.
The earlier impulse than that, the one that made you start making music, when did that first arrive? When did you first feel drawn to, even just as a fan of music, like as a kid?
I think I've always been really excited to use my voice, and I haven't always really known how to do that. Or maybe I was just like kind of doing it in different ways when I was younger. I think
What were the ways when you were younger?
I think like, when I was like 9, 10, 11, 12, it was just like singing anything that I could sing or mimic anything that I could mimic, like, like a Whitney Houston song or like a Madonna song, like at the top of my lungs, or like playing the Beatles like relentlessly, or like learning a Mamas and the Papas harmony and just kind of like adding myself in there and it just feeling really comforting to kind of like melt into the background of something else.
You're from a musical family. Is that right?
Yeah, my grandfather was actually a tenor in the Greenwich City Music Opera, and my dad was always super musical and still is super musical. He's like a super talented piano player and like synth nerd, like prog nerd kind of guy. And my mom actually has a really great voice. She used to kind of sing these boots are made for walking and like any other like rad girl in her 20s, like karaokeed quite a lot. And when she became like an elementary school teacher, when she was teaching me and my brother, she played acoustic guitar and kind of like would sing Raffi songs and stuff like that.
So it felt so, yeah, so music felt like singing and playing music felt like an accessible thing, not like it made you automatically a weirdo in your family to gravitate toward, because that's an option too, right?
No, totally. I think like I remember seeing my dad play the piano. Like that's some of my earliest memories. Or like there was this hallway like that joined to the living room, that joined to the kitchen. It was like a lap that I could take around this house while my dad was playing piano. And I just remember like lapping around him and like making this lap around the house and getting super excited while he was like practicing his scales over and over and over again. And I was like just at piano keys height. And like I could see his back and I could see his hands and I could see the piano keys and I would just kind of like, I don't know, get really little kid hyped around him. And then, at some point he would, put me on his lap and I would sit up there with him while he was playing whatever kind of jazz or classical. I loved it from the very first second I like could get my hands on it.
Yeah. And when did it start to feel like something like that you must do?
It just always felt like a thing that I was doing. It kind of felt like a thing that was just so very much a part of everything that was going on. I think, when I was in high school, it felt like I had to make a decision, like a jump between, we lived like in a really rural area of Pennsylvania, like very backwoods, country, like cornfields and woods and stuff. And that was actually like a choice that my parents made, I think, to kind of create like a lower like monthly overhead kind of thing so that my brother and I were able to kind of like do more as kids. And my mom homeschooled both my brother and I, which was kind of just not super normal, I think, maybe back then. There weren't a lot of homeschooled kids that we could like hang out with. So my brother and I were just like really close growing up. And it kind of just made it so that whatever we were super, super interested in, we could kind of like chase to our fullest abilities. And so for me, that was specifically music and farm, like horses and like riding horses and like breeding barn where I used to ride when I was growing up. And, I think at some point when I was like 16 or 17, it sucks. They tell you when you're that age that like you have to choose between like the things that you love, which I don't know if that's like necessarily totally true, but I ended up choosing music when I was like 17.
Yeah, the idea that, a kid is told that they have to choose, that the idea that like if you chose playing music, you're guaranteed that that's going to work out, and that's the
Right.
way to guarantee it is by choosing it. Where it's like, no, doing sure, like the more you put into one thing, the farther you're going to get with that one thing, except in like this topsy-turvy world where there seems to be no cause and effect whatsoever, and
Right. Well, and
there.
you can want something so, so badly, but that doesn't actually mean that you're gonna have anything to do with it at some point.
Yeah, and you did the kind of extreme version because you went to Berkeley, which is just like where you're like really like you want proof. It's like when kids join the Marines, they're
I
just like, you
do
want
straight
proof that I can be reformed? I'll just go
up.
join the Marines. So you joined the Marines of music colleges.
That's true. Yeah, that's totally true. And it totally is like that. Like, and there is always somebody at that school that is just gonna like out practice you and out shred you and outperform you and out. I mean, it's just it's such a wild place. Like, and to stick a bunch of creatives in the same space like that is really, it's just really interesting. I think needing to find what your niche is, like it just becomes very obvious that like I don't know, like on one hand, like I wanted to go to Berkeley so that I could like be a part of this like larger thing. And then on the other hand, like Berkeley taught me really quickly like that it was really important to stand out and like be unique and like how do I do that?
So you left and moved to New York. Is that
I mean I left not because of that sort of scenario kind of playing out. It was more just financially impossible.
oh yeah.
Like I had a 2-year scholarship, and whatever scholarship I had made it impossible for me to apply for other scholarships. And I just was working like a full-time job bartending at the same time at this place called the Poorhouse, which is no longer, but RIP in Boston. And but like just the whole experience was so all encompassing that I think I just kind of like at some point I needed to drop everything and see what was left a little bit. And I actually ended up moving to Nashville from Boston. I almost ended up in New York. A lot of my friends were moving to New York at that point, but one of my really close friends and we used to collaborate on music quite a lot. This guy Kyle Ryan moved down to Nashville together in like 2008, yeah.
So you had started writing songs already, but by the time you got to Berkeley, you were already writing songs.
Not really. I mean, I think that was part, I think a lot of this journey for me has been, there's so much, obviously, like for some people, like there's so much of a performative aspect of that. And I think, for a long time when I was writing my own songs and making my own music, it was a lot about like, well, what works? You know what I mean? Like what works in like the scheme of things, what works in like a systemic, like in like a capitalist sort of like who will buy this thing that I'm gonna make? You know what I mean? Like how do I make something that someone will buy? I think I did a lot of that out of like a survivalist like stance, just trying to pay my rent. And so I'd say like for a while, like shows, songs, records were made from that place, and it wasn't really like until I had like moved to Nashville, moved to LA, and then moved back to Nashville that like it feels kind of like the expressive thing that I always looked up to, and like in like a Patti Griffin world, or like an Amy Mann sort of world, or you know what I mean? Like these people that were just like just extensions of, their art was this extension of themselves.
I mean, does it feel to you like there's that chapter and then this is a different chapter for you as an artist? The past couple of albums, particularly?
Yeah, I think when I was in high school, I had a pretty gnarly high school like music director, for lack of a better title, I guess. It's just this guy that I was, learning a lot from, that, he had this school, and he was kind of like pretty like manipulative and crazy and like lightly abusive in like 5 million different ways. And I think like it kind of like made me really afraid of like expressing myself creatively. And it kind of like made me stay in like a very like, how do I keep this in a safe space, and like just kind of like do the thing that like makes the other person go like, you did a good job. And
Yeah.
I think that that was kind of just like the place where I stayed for like so many years, and moved down to Nashville, and then eventually moved to LA. And then when I moved back to Nashville after my, experience in LA, I kind of like came back to Nashville for round two, but in this way where I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to be making music, like in a way that, is a professional sort of thing, like as a profession. And like, what is music if it's not paying my bills? And like, what is music if it's just like the thing that I come to at night, or like the thing that I come to when I need to just get something out? And that was kind of when like some of this, or like really all of the songs from the History of a Feeling, like kind of came to be. And songwriting really became like kind of just a completely different world for me, and held me in a way that like I hadn't experienced it holding me before.
So does it feel different now when you're writing? Is there, from the standpoint of like what it, metaphysically feels like, I guess, more than purely physically, like when you're in the act of writing or when does it feel different to you than whatever feelings it triggered before that?
It totally does. I have to like get so much more inside of myself than I used to. And like I think most songs kind of came in like a how do I say this, but say this in a way where I'm not really saying it? Or like, how do I say this in a way that is like so flowery and so descriptive that you have no idea what I'm talking about? So that I don't have to like talk about what I'm talking about, or I don't have to like say the hard thing, or I don't have to like go through the process of like unpacking what I'm actually feeling. And yeah, I don't know. It's like it's become a really crazy space to process a lot of things that have just happened in my life, or even just like a way to kind of express whatever random thing is laying around that day that like could be like the most important feeling, or like the least important feeling. But all feelings are important. So I don't know what it is. It just feels a little bit more forgiving, maybe. Like maybe I'm just a little bit gentler with myself, and like letting myself be imperfect.
Let's talk about, yeah, some of the artists you first fell in love with. What was the first artist that you really idolized in that way and started to look at as someone who might influence you as an artist yourself?
I remember hearing when I was like, I think I was like maybe 12 or something like that. And my grandfather on my dad's side, the opera singer, was dying of cancer. And we were driving up from Pennsylvania, my mom, my dad, and my brother, and I, like once every other week to spend some time with him in the hospital. And we were staying with one of my dad's friends in Connecticut. And I remember one day specifically, there was this like blow up mattress that I was on underneath the piano in this guy's like living room area space. And I remember my parents were listening to NPR and Patti Griffin was doing a live performance of Rain. And I remember hearing it, but I didn't remember the name. I didn't remember the title of the song. I didn't even really remember the lyrics so much, but I remember hearing that and I remember hearing it years and years later, like probably when I was like 19. And being like, oh my God, that's that. That's what that was. And it was like, it was so transporting. And like, all of a sudden I'm like back in Rick Borman's like living room, being 12 years old, like in this like really emotionally fraught place like in my family story and like it was crazy that was sort of like around for me back then because I don't think I still even like came to really playing the acoustic guitar in like a real songwriting way until I was like like 20 like 19 20 something like that. Up until that point, it was like, I don't know, just like like this guy told me that it wasn't cool to play acoustic guitar. Or like, my teacher from back in high school told me that it was like, so lame that I love Sheryl Crow and the Dixie Chicks and like all of these like very emotional singers are, which is such a shitty thing, you know what I mean? Like and it just like really bums me out for like this like younger person like really wanting to just like be a part of somebody else's world and like wanting to prove myself and like wanting to just like be good at this thing. And I would do whatever it took, for this person to tell me that like I was good enough and that I could like be good enough. So man, we really gotta be careful what we say to those kids. You know what
Truly,
I mean?
truly. Also,
Right?
what a fucking misogynist.
What a fucking asshole.
Yeah. But and so I mean, I don't want to linger too long on, but what did he want you to play? Where it's like,
He wanted me to play cock rock. He wanted me to like shred a Led Zeppelin solo, which is totally cool and like empowering on some level that, like he wants to hand like an electric guitar to like this, high school girl for sure, and like when it comes down to it, like that's where my bones are. That's just somewhere different, like I'm trying to go somewhere completely different. And yeah, it's funny. Like it's funny like as you unpack and like peel back the layers, like how much reckoning with your 14-year-old self that you end up doing like as a 30 something year old person. Like turns out that was really formative back then.
damn, yeah, couldn't how could it not be for real? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Totally.
but when you reheard, you're sort of starting to almost be on the other side of that at 19. You hear that Patti Griffin song again, and you do your own internal Shazamming, and you're like, I know that song.
Totally.
That's why I know it. It's that song. Did you know it was Patti Griffin, or what did you do? What did you do with that?
Well, and at that point, I think, I was almost a year into Berkeley, and Berkeley had this really cool thing that they did for students where they opened up the performance center for students and had like these bigger artists come through and like and give shows and you could go for free as a student if you signed up or something like that. I can't remember. But like at some point I remember Brandy Carlisle coming through and opening up for Ray LaMontagne. And like for some reason, I don't even know how I heard music back then because like we didn't have Spotify, we didn't really have the internet. Like how did I heard about Brandy Carlisle before she ended up coming through the Berkeley Performance Center. And I just remember telling like all of my friends that we had to go to this show. Like I remember telling like any of my like singer-songwriter buddies that like this was gonna be something important and I wasn't really sure why, but we had to go. And there were like 20 of us. And like that one show when I was 19 was like totally spellbinding and life-changing for me. I remember watching these two performances and going like, oh my God, you can totally do this. Like, oh my God, like you're allowed to just have an acoustic guitar and like sing about your feelings. Like this is so crazy. And like that was really like the moment that kind of set me, on this path or like on this course to like I don't know, trying to figure that out for myself. It was awesome. It was like one of, I still like, I can still like Brandy Carlisle's whole stage setup was like blue light. And like she had the twins, standing on either side of her. And then right after that, like Ray LaMontagne was playing solo by himself. And it was just this like thick red wash. And he kept like running his hands through his hair and like touching his forehead just because he's like so intense and like he's just like feeling some stuff and like going through some stuff probably all the time and like and I just remember being like, oh yes, what is this like open raw nerve and like this is everything. Like I just wanted to be inside of that feeling like 24/7.
So this would have been like 05-ish or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and he was in full on like Trouble had like just come out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that record really sent him into like the stratosphere so much. And like it was so cool to just like watch. And I still think, it's a funny, I feel like with like certain books that I read or like certain movies that I watch or like certain like poems that I read or certain performances, like it takes me such a long time to like process what it is that like I'm supposed to process or like, what it is about like those specific things that like I can apply to like my own personal experience. And like that performance has continued to be so important to me as I don't know, I keep wanting to like cut the fat, you know what I mean? And like narrow things down and like look for like the most like raw nerve, like most authentic like pieces of like whether it be like the lyric or like the guitar part or like I don't know, even like when I'm building out like a song or a track, just like making sure that I like just cut the shit, like just get rid of anything that like just isn't supposed to like authentically be there. And it took me a really long time still to get there. Like I still think like when I was 19 and like I went forward from like that experience, still taking that into like the studio or like listening to like what that guy says or like listening to like what like this, my first manager told me like was the thing that I needed to do to get the attention of the person at the this record label that will like put me on tour with this, but you know what I mean? Like still trying to like take in all of the noise and make all of the noise and all of the parts work for myself because like I thought that that was like the key when like the key is actually or like the key for me has actually been to try to like go with my gut and like listen to like or like follow what feels the most real to me. Who knew?
One of the things that it feels like has been consistent throughout this time, throughout the time that you've been releasing music, is this different versions of finding how to talk about what you're feeling. And I wonder what, over the course of making your own music and writing songs, like where you think are some discoveries, some moments where you found a new technique or found a way to reapproach it so that you could be finding the words better, finding the feeling better.
I feel like I have to kind of like trick myself a lot. Does that make sense? Like I have to kind of like do it a little bit different every time. And like I feel like the trick to it and the key to it for me has been like trying to do it like in a new way to make myself a little bit uncomfortable and like access it from like a different vantage point, even if I'm doing it with somebody that like I know really well.
What would be
Or
sorry to interrupt, what would be an example of like making yourself uncomfortable, like just enough? Like what kind of thing might do that?
like I feel like I've gotten the best recordings sometimes when like I haven't practiced at all. I haven't practiced the song, like so it's not so rehearsed. Like the vocal isn't so rehearsed. I haven't like figured out how to hit each part of it super perfectly. Honestly, I feel like my anxiety in that or like my like sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes there's like a little bit of like a well, I don't know, let's just fuck it and like see what happens and like be open to making mistakes and like actually the mistake being the thing that you like end up falling in love with most of all. That's been like a really fun trick is like not even like learning anything well enough to like to do it perfectly, which I think is one of the reasons why like live music has like really even recently, like no joke, like in the last like year, I have like enjoyed performing in a way that like I had never never thought possible or never really like unlocked for myself, like the joy of like kind of falling forward and like sometimes catching myself and sometimes not catching myself.
Yeah, and just availing yourself of the generosity of the audience that it's not actually that important to them if you fuck up and start over or get the words wrong or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah, well, and I think it is, it's like, it's just learning to trust that, like at this point, after like 15 years of like trying to do something perfectly, that like when I'm imperfect, it's still pretty okay. And like that the point of any of this is to actually just like, when I'm specifically making a record, like the point of making the record is to like just try and hold a mirror up and like show what's there to everybody, like for better or for worse. And like, same goes with those live performances. You know what I mean? Like that day is like just gonna be like I'm gonna sing that song however I'm gonna sing that song for her, however, the day has gone or whoever I am as a result of like, this moment happening right now, which is just such a cool thing that like everybody gets to show up, in this room, in this space together and just like experience whatever the hell is about to happen and unfold in like that hour or two long period.
you also do some sort of songwriting, like collaborating with other songwriters, behind the scenes and getting together to do that kind of work. Is there a different technique? Like, do you, the technique of writing for yourself and really trying to drill down on what you're trying to say and being true to your feeling, but when then there's somebody else who's going to be performing the song or who you're collaborating with, how is that different for you?
I think my job in those rooms is different only in that like it's sort of part of my job to like open that person up to the best of my ability and like not be the one that's like trying to say it the best for myself, but kind of like try to like be present and there to catch whatever comes out, like as we're trying to crack this person open or crack this feeling open or idea open. And it totally is a different muscle. And like but it also just like kind of like requires like just the same sort of like present state of mind kind of thing. Like writing for other people is so fun. It's so fun because like how somebody else like wants to express this thing and like wants to like get this idea out and down is like going to be so different from like like whatever color I would use, and it's so fun to like hear somebody else's language and like try to like learn how to speak that other language with them and then like add our languages together. Like it's just such a cool, you get something that's just like so awesome and unique. Also, thank you so much for like doing this interview. Like I just got home, so if my mind seems like so melty and like
It
and just
really,
like
it
so
really,
all over
it
the
really
place,
doesn't.
I really appreciate you having the patience to kind of like follow the fucking thing with me because I'm a little bit like I just got home Sunday like in the afternoon and I came from Denver by way of Maine, by way of Boston, by way of Nashville for 36 hours, by way of like Croatia and Europe and like that whole thing. So like there's a little bit of me that is just like, what is time, man? And like what is travel? And like what am I supposed to be doing? And like, oh my God, I literally don't have any underwear right now. It's insane. Like,
Well, so this is how long are you home now? Like, what, you got a little break? What's the vibe? Is it a bummer to talk about because you're like, don't remind me of other things? But
no, dude, to be honest, like I haven't felt like this motivated to like stay on my shit. I don't know why. Like, I mean, it's like when something good happens, like it's really scary. And like I become like almost like, well, first of all, I'm very suspicious, like always, first and foremost, always suspicious. But then always like very like not like it becomes like borderline self-sabotagey. You know what I mean? It's like I'm just like, well, when is it going to be over? And like, do I have to do this thing? And like, where's the smoke on the horizon? But like for some reason, like in the last like couple of months, I'm just like, oh my God, like I love this. And like I feel so for the last like 6 months, I've been so grateful and like so I don't know, just like excited to like stay in it and like stay with like a certain amount of like forward motion and like output and like I really want to start a new record. I think it's like in there somewhere, and like there are definitely way more shows like happening for the rest of this year, and like some other stuff that's like kind of coming to light. And yeah, I don't know. I'm excited. I'm actually excited to work.
But that's exciting because Weird Faith came out in February, so that's still a new album. And yeah, there's obviously going to be some more tour stuff announced in the months ahead. But yeah, without pinning down anything too much about this new music that feels like it's percolating, like yeah, what's the vibe? What's the vibe you're feeling? What's the aura? Is there any word? Can we give any word of description to the aura of this next thing? And you don't have to, but I feel compelled to ask.
I'm hoping that it feels like an arrow. Like I'm kind of hoping to just like continue to hone my accuracy with like the nerve of the thing, you know? Like I'm hoping to just like it's like when you find your funny bone, or like the reflex in your knee. Like you take like the rubber mallet and like you get really psyched at the doctor's office when you're a kid and you just kind of keep hitting on that thing. That's how I feel right now. I'm like, oh my God, I know exactly where it is. And I would love to just like continue to like, I don't know, exercise, excuse me, this moment and that feeling, and see like what else is in there.
It's an acupuncture needle.
It's an acupuncture needle. Right. It's like not an arrow. It's not like the knife's edge. It's not yeah, it's absolutely an acupuncture needle. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
Sweet.
I love that.
Well, I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap up, Maddie.
Hell yeah. All
Yeah.
right.
Go take your Rainbow Kitten surprise sweatshirt and get some undies. Go just drive pantsless to the store, get some new undies. Just start your vacation off right.
I luckily asked for the matching shorts, so I can say that like I will not be needing to go bottomless to the store.
Thanks again to Maddie. I loved that conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, the new deluxe edition of Weird Faith comes out later this month on October 25th. You can pre-save it at MadiDiaz.com. And while you're there, get tickets for one of her upcoming shows with Rainbow Kitten Surprise. That tour begins in early November. And thank you for listening to episode 112 of the LSQ podcast, or any of the others you might have checked out. You can find all of them at JennyLSQ.com and on all the podcast platforms. And you can reach me at JennyLSQ on Instagram. I'll talk to you next time.